Let's take a look at a sample research paper. For this assignment, the student chose to write about antidepressants, and they focused mostly on researching antidepressants and their use with children. As we look through this sample, pay close attention to the writer's introduction and thesis statement, the support and citations provided in the body paragraphs, and the references included at the end. Would you feel safe taking a pill that could cause harm to your body and mentality? 1 out of 10 Americans take this type of pill every day. These pills are called antidepressants. Antidepressants are mainly used for patients with major depression, but can also be prescribed for patients with other disorders such as anxiety, chronic pain, eating disorders, and obsessive-compulsive disorders. Antidepressants work throughout the brain by balancing chemicals that are imbalanced. By taking these antidepressants, people are supposed to feel better and happier as a whole. Approximately 41,226,394 Americans are prescribed a type of antidepressant, with nearly 5 million of these people aging from 24 years old or younger. Antidepressant drugs should never be prescribed to children because they can lead to physical health risks, suicidal behavior, and suicidal thoughts. So in this introduction, we can see they started off with a very strong hook that pulls us into their project, and then they provided some general information on antidepressants. At the very end, we see they have a thesis, so although they are being very informative here, they're still presenting us with an argument or a reason why we should care about this topic, and we know that throughout their paper, they're going to talk about the physical health risks associated with antidepressants, suicidal behavior, and suicidal thoughts. Antidepressants can lead to serious physical health risks. Antidepressants can cause harmful side effects such as sexual problems, neurological difficulties, cardiovascular effects, and weight changes. The most commonly prescribed antidepressants among adults and children are SSRIs because they have fewer side effects than the others. An SSRI is also known as a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. There are several types of SSRIs, which include fluoxetine or Prozac, sertraline, Zoloft, paroxetine or Paxil, citalopram, Celexa, escitalopram, Lexapro, or fluvoxamine, Luvox. According to Cascade 2009, there were 700 patients on SSRIs. 38% of them reported having side effects, and only 25% of the side effects were considered being very bothersome or extremely bothersome. There are a handful of patients on antidepressants who will experience side effects even though they're prescribed SSRIs and are supposed to experience fewer side effects. These side effects can be short or long-term. High doses of SSRIs can increase the severity of these side effects. For example, serotonin syndrome is a condition in which too much of the mood elevator is present in the brain, which can occur within minutes, producing high blood pressure, hypothermia, high body temperature, and an increased heart rate that can lead to shock. How would you feel giving your kid a medication at such a young age that it could affect them the rest of their lives or even cost them their life? Not only are these side effects major, but these side effects can cause children to be vulnerable to an increased risk of heart attack and stroke when older. As hard as it is to deal with depression itself, many people believe these medications can help those that suffer from a mental illness. At the same time, antidepressants do not always help with those illnesses. Instead, they may lead to suicidal behavior. Annually, the suicidal rate of depressed patients approximates 16,000 deaths each year in the United States. According to Matthews 2000, suicide attempts occur in 17 to 24% of depressed patients, and this is close to nearly 1/4 of the amount of depressed patients. At typical doses, the risk for self-harm is at 1.4%, while the higher doses increase the risk of self-harm by 3.1%. Of the 2,200 adolescents prescribed SSRI medications, about 4% of those taking SSRI medications experienced suicidal thinking or behavior, including actual suicide attempts, twice the rate of those taking the placebo or sugar pills. Antidepressants nearly double the risk of suicidal behavior and self-harm. Given that antidepressants may lead to self-harm, why are doctors prescribing children these medications when they have such bad outcomes? Antidepressants are also known to increase suicidal thoughts. After comparing patients on antidepressants versus those taking a placebo, the only patients who showed an increased rate of suicidal thoughts were the ones prescribed antidepressants. The rate goes up nearly double. Robert Temple stated, "It now seems clear that the drugs do indeed increase the risk of suicidality in the trials from about 2% to about 4%. As a placebo is a harmless pill that has no harmful side effects and it's more for the patient's satisfactory of knowing they're taking a medication to fix their problems, these statistics are alarming. Patients need to be more aware of the dangerous outcomes when they give their children these antidepressants. Of course, every parent wants to help their child the best way they can, but for some, these medications are hurting them. Instead, one study conducted in a Minnesota community found that out of approximately 23,887 patients, 5.8% of those patients were treated with depression, and at the end of those 6 months, 95% of those patients treated with depression were chronically ill. About 10 to 15% of patients had treatment-resistant depression. These prescriptions made the brain undergo a series of adaptations in an effort to maintain a normal function. For some Americans, particularly children whose brains are not fully developed, these antidepressants cause the brain to not function properly. As easy as it is to take pills instead of choosing healthier alternatives, it's important to know the long-term effects antidepressants can inflict on children at such a young age. According to the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey, more than 60% of Americans taking antidepressant medication have taken it for 2 years or longer, with 14% having taken the medication for 10 years or more. The percentages that do stay on the medication long-term face more conflicts than just depression. Prozac is one of the few antidepressants that is approved by the FDA for treating children 8 years or older. One of the reasons for this is that they are not addictive in the sense of cravings, although doctors say they do make users dependent. In one analysis, researchers took the patients that were doing well on the medication and switched them to dummy or placebo pills. The study showed that antidepressants cut the odds of relapse by 70%. We teach our kids at a young age to be drug-free, but what defines the terminology drug? As parents, you teach your child to not rely on drugs for happiness, but antidepressants do that exact thing. More coping skills should be taught rather than having children rely on a drug to maintain their happiness at such a young age. It is up to parents and doctors to end this overly prescribed percentage of adolescents on antidepressants and teach healthier alternatives. According to the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey, about 1 in every 10 Americans aged 12 and older takes antidepressant medication. The increased percentage of adolescents prescribed to antidepressants is dangerous with the lack of knowledge these parents have. One psychiatrist, R. Scott, said teens and children get put on antidepressants in a too casual way. Recovering from depression requires action, although taking action may be more difficult than just taking a happy pill when one is depressed. Coping skills are the most important key to learn when someone is in this position. Adolescents need to be taught healthier coping skills instead of becoming dependent on medication at such a young age. Rather than facing health risks, there are healthier alternatives to help this mental illness, such as joining a support group for depression, keeping up with social and physical activities, or turning to friends and family who are supportive. Psychiatrist Robert DeRubius has said himself, "To my mind, psychotherapy remains the single most helpful technology for the treatment of depression. It may be hard for one that is depressed to become physically active, although even something as simple as walking can benefit children. According to one study, walking fast for about 35 minutes a day, 5 times a week, or 60 minutes a day, 3 times a week, had a significant influence on mild to moderate depression symptoms." Antidepressants can be more of a problem to depressed patients than many realize. This pill that is supposed to help children function and do their day-to-day tasks may be hurting them in ways they may not see. The overuse of antidepressants needs to decrease tremendously. By examining children more closely, this could begin an ending point for this dangerous drug. Antidepressants are making kids and teens dependent on a drug to maintain happiness. This teaches teenagers the wrong idea. More coping skills should be taught rather than having kids rely on a prescription to maintain their happiness. Along with the dependency issue, health risks are a big issue that can potentially hurt children in the present or future. Would you feel comfortable giving your kid antidepressants after knowing the risks? So here we can see the student had several well-constructed body paragraphs that all focused on a different point of their research, and their body paragraphs were supported with parenthetical citations. Although they do have a number of grammatical and mechanical errors, they did a pretty good job of transitioning between their paragraphs and pulling everything together. Now, take a look at the student's references page. Although the slide does not allow for us to put it in APA formatting with our running head, you can still see the different citations. Do also note that the references are listed in alphabetical order.